You've been a school teacher, a sign language researcher, a leader in many different fields. But to most people, you're Gerry Hughes, the first deaf person to solo circumnavigate the world via the 5 Great Capes, right?
That's right.
During your voyage, were there times when you thought you might die, that you'd never get back to be talking to me here today?
Well, I've always known I wanted to sail round the world. People used to criticise me for it, but I knew it was something I had to decide for myself with my family. I explained to them, one day it will happen, so be prepared. But I believed instinctively that it would be fine. Not being big-headed or arrogant, I knew I'd just have to totally concentrate because it's high risk with the weather. When the weather's bad, well, I'm used to that. But when it gets really bad, it's frightening, because there's no escape. When the sky gets dark and the sea's tossing the boat around and the wind's pushing you hard against the steering wheel, you just hope and pray for it to abate, for the rain to stop. But when it carries on, things start to go through your mind. I'd have flashbacks of my family and my deaf friends, but I had to just focus, because one slip could send me dangerously off course. So I had to focus. But your mind does go back, aye.
At one time your boat capsized, didn't it?
Well, the weather was beautiful. Everything was fine. Just the usual rolling seas. I'd gone down below and shut all the hatches. They're glass, well, plastic actually, so that you can see through. I'd just closed them just to make sure. So I was inside making coffee. The jar was empty, so I went to the cupboard for more. Not a thing to worry about. The boat was rising and falling. The usual rhythms that I'm used to. Then all of a sudden, I felt the boat starting to turn over. So I grabbed hold of the metal pole. My feet were treading air and the boat was turning right over. Water was pouring in everywhere. Next thing I knew, the boat was upside down and I'd landed feet first on the ceiling. I could see through the glass the green water swirling around below me and beside me. It was like a massive washing machine, and the water kept pouring in. I had visions of Kay, my wife, flashing through my head. I could feel the boat sinking. I thought, this is impossible. But thankfully, the boat somehow righted itself. The whole thing only lasted less than 15 seconds, then it righted itself. I opened the hatch and went out. Everything was fine. I thought, how on earth did that happen? Some of my stuff was wrecked. A rope had snapped, and as the sail swung round and fell, a big wave came across the boat and turned it right round 360 degrees.
So, what keeps you going when things are like that? What makes you determined to get there?
Well, I believe I'm a yachtsman, and I think a yachtsman needs to have a real bond with his boat. He must have that connection to communicate with the boat. That's so important. If you put too much tension and strain on the masts and rigging, the boat will get stressed and suffer. You can't force a boat. You have to work with it. You can't push it or yourself too much. You have to be in harmony, and you have to know the sea well, all its rhythms, the weather as well. You have to understand its patterns. If you do, it's fine. You can't leave anything to chance. You have to think one step ahead all the time, so that if anything happens, you can keep control. All the time, right round the clock, you can never relax. People seem to think you're out there fishing and relaxing with your wee sun hat on, having a nice easy time. No, it's sheer constant hard work.
Well, we're delighted that you're here to tell us all about it. But now, I'd like to take you back to when you were born in Scotland, in Glasgow, in 1957.
Hey, you're telling everybody my age.
But soon after you were born, you almost died. Can you tell us about that?
Well, from what my family have told me, they said when I was born it was a difficult birth. Very difficult. Hard to deal with. I was very small. After a while, they told my parents it was all over. So they called a vigil, and a priest was summoned. He gave me a blessing and that was it. But to the doctor's surprise, I kept on breathing. My dad said, "Aye, that's Gerry, he's a fighter." So I got better. But then a while later I was taken ill again and went back to hospital. They called the priest again, held prayers, another vigil, surrounded by nuns, gave the blessing. The doctor came, and I came through it again. Then I became ill for a third time. I had a problem with my esophagus. When I ate, the food wasn't going down properly. It wasn't properly connected and food was spilling into my lungs. It was very painful. The doctors carried out some tests and eventually they decided I needed an operation. I'd be about 1.5 or 2. My parents were really upset. But my dad's family, my parents' families were both Irish, my dad's family in Dublin got talking to them. They said to my dad, "Look, wrap Gerry up. Get him on a plane and bring him over here. Don't bother talking to the doctors, just bring him to the hospital over here." So my dad decided to ignore the doctors, wrapped me up and flew me to Dublin. The family put me in the car and raced to the hospital. They explained to the doctors over there and they carried out some tests. They waited for the results and after a while a doctor came and said, "He'll be fine. Just keep him sat up with his back straight and it'll sort itself out." My parents were so relieved. So the doctors went away, Mum and Dad stood there all happy. And then the doctors came back and said, "You do know your son is deaf." They were stunned. They'd been trying to communicate with me, but all the time I was deaf, so that was it.
So the priest gave you the last rites because they thought you were going to die. But you came through. Did your parents see this as a sign of inner strength that would sustain you through your life?
Not so much my mum, but my dad. He always said, "Gerry's a fighter." He always believed that. He and I would have mock boxing matches, would fight with each other. But we were really close. I had huge respect for my dad. He had a great influence on me. He never patronised me, always told me to do things for myself, make my own decisions. He gave me advice, but we were always a partnership. He always looked after me. He'd been in the Merchant Navy. He loved the sea. It's in our family history. Never mind that I was deaf, he took me sailing from the time I was 2. He took me to sea. He always encouraged me right from the time I was wee. And from then on it came as second nature to me.
From Ireland, you came back to Scotland to go to school, St Vincent's School for the Deaf in Glasgow. But that didn't turn out too well, did it?
Well, at the time I went to St Vincent, I had no idea, I just took it as it came. The school had a strong oralist methodology, headphones, microphones and everything. I thought that's just how it was and I went along with it. I remember when I came home, my dad would say, "How was school?" And I'd say, "Holy, holy." Because every day we had to practice the Lord's Prayer and the Hail Mary, by rote, copying what was on the blackboard. So when Dad asked, that was it. But while I was parroting all this, I never knew what the next word was.
All through school, what you really looked forward to was going sailing with your dad at weekends, wasn't it?
Well, Saturday was always my dad's day for sailing, and he always took me with him. Off we went every week. And when we finished, he always bought me a bag of chips, and I would sit in the car, unwrap the chips, and eat them while he was driving home. That was a regular routine.
When you were only 10, you and your father had your first big argument over navigation. Tell us what happened.
Well, this particular time, my dad was at the tiller and I asked him to change course. My dad said, "No, we're going that way, I'm the captain." So he continued on, fag in hand, and I started to get very tense. I said, "No, go that way." He put his hand out and kind of pushed me away. So I let go of the rope I was holding and the sail started flapping all over the place. He got it under control and said, "Stop it, don't let it go, I'm the captain." And we carried on. I was getting more and more agitated that way, but my dad just said, "No, you stay there." I was already quite strong at that time, so I jumped astride the tiller and started pushing it the way I wanted to go. My dad said, What are you doing? I couldn't make out what he was saying, but I kept pointing the way I wanted to go. He couldn't understand why I was so insistent. Then my mum got involved and they were arguing, but finally they agreed to go the way I wanted, even though he'd no idea why. So we sailed into this bay surrounded by mountains and dropped anchor. Dad said, "Are you satisfied now?" And I just went below into my bunk and fell asleep. He still couldn't fathom it. But later on in the evening, the shipping forecast was on the radio at 6 o'clock. So my dad switched it on and he was listening. And he thought, my God. There was a warning to all sailing boats to please return to their moorings because there was a severe storm on the way. Dad was shocked. There were distress flares going up all over the place. And he looked, and there I was, sleeping peacefully, completely oblivious to it all. And as he looked at me then, that was when he recognised and started to realise he knows the sea. Because whenever he'd sit me down to ask what time it was, I had no idea at all. When he asked me the names of streets near my home, I hadn't a clue. I couldn't read, I couldn't write, but I did understand the sea and the weather. So he was worried about my future.
When you were 13, you left Scotland again to go to England. Why was that?
Well, my mum and dad started to look very serious, and I could sense from their body language that something was different. Then they started to pack a big suitcase. Asked where we were going. They said it's okay, so we got in the car. I was in the back and mum and dad were in the front. We were driving for ages, and I noticed my dad was chain smoking, which wasn't like him. When we arrived at the school, Sister Barbara, the head teacher, was waiting for us. My heart was thumping. We put down my suitcase and went down a series of corridors into a classroom. I thought, oh, this is a school. I didn't question why I was there, I just accepted it. There were tables round 3 sides of the classroom and deaf children sitting with headphones on. So I sat down and put a pair on and we all sat saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. When I turned round to look, my mum and dad were away and the door was shut. Eh? Anyway, we carried on 1, 2, 3, 4, and I was getting really anxious, but I thought I'd better hold it and wait. I had to remember to behave myself. Then the bell rang and everybody else was milling round about me like I was the Scottish odd one out. I remembered the way back to the front of the building, so I ran back the way we'd come, but the car had gone. It was a sickening feeling.
What's your first memory of Boston Spa?
Oh, aye. I remember the teacher speaking into the microphone. Then she told us to write it down. She wanted us to write a poem about what she'd said. It was maybe something about a bucket of water. Somebody opened the window and threw it out. And all the other heads went straight down trying to write their poems. And they were writing screeds of stuff, but I had nothing. I had no idea how. I said, "What do you want me to do?" She tried to explain and they were all writing away, but I just felt churned up inside. They could all read, but I couldn't. So the door opened and the head teacher came in. I was really nervous. I knew they were talking about me because she kept looking at me. Then she told me to come with her. So I followed her, but I didn't know what it was for. We went into the library and sat down at this table. I'll never forget it. My heart's still going 19 to the dozen. So she put a book down in front of me and asked me to read it. So I read out the words one by one. Then she stopped me and said, "That was very good, very good. Now tell me what it's about." I said, "I don't know." "No? Right, what's that word? The. Right, what's that word?" And I pronounced what it was because I'd been taught how to speak the words syllable by syllable. Like comfortable. Comfortable. And I'd get praised for parroting the words, but I'd no idea what they meant. Da, 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 da. Yes, but what does it mean? I don't know. And that was the starting point. Every week, Monday to Friday, I had half an hour with the head teacher. What's that? What does that say? I don't know, I don't know. And she'd explain to me with a dictionary. She'd write down what things meant and draw things to help me understand. Oh, that's what it means. Oh. Every day, Monday to Friday for a whole year. Maybe about a year and a half. And I started to get it. I could see what it meant. I could see through the words to the pictures behind them, and I started to unpack the meanings. And I'd look at her and she'd say, yes, yes. She'd bring me a book and I was able to read it and tell her what it was about. Yes. It was like a fog had lifted. I'd broken through the deadlock. Before it was like I kept hitting a wall. Now I'd found my way through to the concepts, and my mind was full of ideas I'd never known before.
Can you remember the first sentence you ever wrote? Can you tell us what it said?
Oh, aye. My dad had a newspaper about the sailor Sir Francis Chichester. He was a famous navigator. He sailed round the world, I think, about 1967. He left it lying about and I picked it up. It was full of pictures and I loved it. I really felt a connection with it. Because when I was at school, crying my eyes out, I was really angry. Angry with my father, angry with my mother. We'd been separated and I felt such anger. It made me full of suspicion. I couldn't trust anybody. And at the back of my mind, what I always wanted was to go back to sea. That's what I missed the most. Whenever I saw a river, my mind would go back and I'd get so upset. My dad, I thought I could trust him and he'd just dumped me. How could this be? So I was really angry and emotional and confused. And I was determined. I thought, one day I'll sail round the world. I did think that. But before I could do that, I had to learn to read and write. So when I was reading this newspaper about what he had done, I wrote on it, one day I will go like him. I don't know where it came from, I just wrote it. My dad kept it, and when I sailed round the world, there it was.
You left school at the age of 18. What were your plans at that time?
Well, at that time, I really wanted to work with boats and engines. I remember telling my dad I wanted to work as a marine engineer. Fitting engines, oiling them, getting my hands dirty. I loved ship engines. My dad didn't want to say I couldn't. I can never ever remember seeing him say, you can't. He would choose his words carefully and he'd say something like, you'll have to work very hard. There'll be a lot of writing. I said I will. That's what I want. So he thought the next thing to do was for me to go to college to get more qualifications. I only had what were called CSEs at that time. He thought I should try and move on to O-levels. That would be really tough. I applied to college in Glasgow, but they turned me down because I was deaf. So my dad racked his brains, and I don't know where he got the information from, but he said, why not go to Norfolk House, sixth form college? It's a deaf college. So I went down there, had an interview, and I managed to get in. The both of us were chuffed, and things took off from there.
When you finished college in England, you went back to Scotland and got involved in football. Did people look at you differently?
Oh, the scene was very different from England. They used to call me English, not Scottish, and I was gutted. I said, I'm Scottish. I went to St Vincent's. They said, aye, that'll be right, you're English. The social life was similar, but the education was way different, really different. That was what disappointed me. When I was talking to my pals, I asked somebody, are you at college? How's it going? He said, college? No, I'm not at college. I said, but when you leave school, you must have gone to college. I went to college and now I'm back in Glasgow. I'm looking for another college to go to. You must have been to college. Nah. I thought, okay, I'll ask somebody else. So I asked somebody and it turned out none of them had been to college. I thought, what has St Vincent's been doing? Like they'd all come to school, they'd been taught all the way up the school. Then bye-bye, they left school, out the door shut behind them, and they fell straight onto the scrap heap. Then another generation, same routine, out the door onto the scrap heap. Generation after generation telling the parents they were doing so well, and the deaf kids had no idea. I wasn't happy with that. So that's when I decided I wanted to be a teacher.
So you wanted to become a teacher. But were there struggles along the way?
I remember in 1979, I posted an application to a teacher training college, and I got a very encouraging reply back from them. My dad helped me with the application forms, filling in the paperwork and explaining things. So finally, they gave me an interview and I went along. There were 3 of them in the interview, and my dad was sitting next to me. At that time, in the interview, I remember my dad was smoking and chatting away. You couldn't do that now, but I remember my dad sitting there smoking. He was helping me with the communication. I was speaking and he would tell me what they were saying. So on it went, and I got through. Very good. But I had to have a medical first. I handed my medical envelope over and they looked at it. And the guy did a double take. He started talking behind his hand to the 2 on each side of him. Then he started talking to me, and his face was really stern-looking. My dad sat up in his chair and said something back to him. I couldn't believe how angry he looked. Then he threw down his fag and launched into a full-scale argument with them. I said, "Dad." He said, "Wait." I thought, what? And it turned out I'd been failed because I was deaf. I couldn't train to be a teacher because I was deaf. What? So that was the start of many battles ahead.
In 1981, you started work as a researcher on the BSL project in Edinburgh with Mary Brennan. How did that transform your life?
I remember at the interview I had a lot of arguments with Mary about her philosophy. I said, "Get away, I don't agree with that." No. Because I believed at that time deaf. Remember, I was very oral, and the signs I'd learned were from St. Vincent's. But from that point on, I realised it was my vision that had been wrong. When I got to know Mary and she explained things, my life changed. I realised it was me. Before that, I was confused about my own identity. I was oral and proud of it, and my father was proud as well. I didn't know any different. I was embarrassed about being deaf, and I thought I should speak. I was torn 2 ways, but then it hit me. BSL, this was me. And I looked inside myself and I thought, my God, I've been living in a dream, an illusion. The teachers had told me, "Gerry Hughes, there's a new world waiting out there for you which will make you happy." And I grinned and went along with it. But hang on, where's me? Mary was an amazing woman. She changed my life.
Then you went back to Glasgow and set up Quest for a Language. What was that?
I was courting Kay at the time. And the 2 of us went to see a film called Quest for a Fire. It was about these apes. Nowadays we've got cars and planes and everything. But at that time there was nothing, no writing. It was about how these apes communicated and looked after each other. I was sitting watching the film, and as I was watching it I realised this was the same as how deaf people suffered persecution from hearing people, being harassed to try and please them all the time, never standing up for our rights. The apes were scared that the lions would come and eat their babies. They didn't know how to defend themselves. Then they discovered fire, just by one of them banging sticks together or something in a tantrum. And the apes worked out that if they built a fire around themselves, the lions couldn't come through it. They'd be scared, and the apes would be protected. And I thought, if we know our language, that'll be our protection. We can challenge them. So that's when I decided to set up Quest for a Language.
All this time, you were still driven to try and become a teacher. Then in 1995, you finally became Scotland's first deaf teacher for 100 years. How did that make you feel?
Well, I never really expected it to happen. My father had died by that time, and I was still battling on. Then for some reason it suddenly occurred to me that I should go and see a lawyer. So I went along to meet this lawyer with a huge pile of letters. I put them down in front of him and I said, "You're my last chance. I'd like you to help me." So I left them with him and I went home. 2 days later, my wife Kay said, "There's a fax coming through." It was from the lawyer asking me to go to his office the next morning. I said, "Oh, it must mean I've been turned down. It's too quick. He can't have done all the research." But I went along the next day and he put the papers on his desk and shook my hand. I couldn't really make out what he was saying and I was nervous, but then he said, "This is Nazism towards deaf people. It's barbaric." So I said, "But how can you help me?" He said, "I've done it. I've sent everything off. I'm taking this to the European Court of Human Rights."
So there was a happy outcome, but your father, who'd been there all your life, guiding, encouraging and supporting you, when you finally became a teacher, he never saw it. What did you feel?
Well, my dad, I'm sure he's up there feeling proud. My mum was there and she was very emotional. I wish Dad had been there because he had always been there for me. And I'd made this journey for him.